So we're just about ready to glue the top on. I wanted to talk about this design of putting the foam inside this. With the quantity of foam I've added, I had used about 3 large cans. This has added about 2.2 kilos. So while it does save a great deal of time, because you don't need to tape with fiberglass the inside seams in order to hold it together, the foam basically holds it together, it does add quite a bit of weight. Now I'm thinking that I'm still not going to abandon this idea, and maybe the next one I build, what I will do is put in some containers to make up some space inside there, and that will save having to put in so much foam. Some milk containers which themselves would be watertight, but that's just a approach I'm experimenting with. So if you want really nice light outriggers, once you've assembled, put epoxy tape along the inside seams, epoxy and fiberglass tape, before you start removing the outer connectors. Now note that will, once that dries, it's going to kind of, this is really easy with the foam because you can pull these out quite readily. The foam doesn't hold onto them that tightly. But when you run tape along the inside, that is going to hold onto them quite tightly, and a lot of them are going to break. So I previously have, on the inside, run tape along that, there, and then I come back and I do a little bit of extra over those places once I've removed all of the cable ties. So that's another approach there. But let's now talk about putting the top onto the kayak. So get a sander, ideally, or some sandpaper, and what you want to do is, you can see here that I have sanded these so that, and you can run something like this along the top to check that you've got these nice and level, so you've got a nice level surface to glue the top onto. Pay particular attention at points like this where you've got the bulkheads. You don't want any sort of raised bits and that sort of thing. Run your straight edge tool along and just check that everything is nice and flat, so that you'll be able to put on the top. If you've got any holes, you can fill them in like I have here with a bit of thickened epoxy. That was just an area where I made a bit of a mess with the sanding machine, the electric sander. And then mix up either thickened epoxy. You want a fair bit, just again to fill up any gaps as you put that on. And you very carefully lay it on top without sort of smudging and smearing all that around, and start screwing it down, as I previously did on the sides here, with little squares of plywood to hold it while gluing. That might be a 2-person job, so that you don't end up accidentally kind of moving the ply around too much and smushing out the thickened epoxy. You can use any other waterproof glue that is reasonably thick, and the thickness is the issue, because you want to be able to take up any little gaps that you haven't anticipated that are going to occur there. And we will see once I've actually glued on the first panel. Oh, by the way, just ignore the kind of lee board setup that I've embedded into the outrigger here. This is an experiment that I'm trying. This might turn into a new design, maybe a 1.2 design of the outriggers. I suspect it might make it a little bit hard to turn the kayak, having lee boards embedded in the outriggers. But it does simplify the overall design a little bit, because you're not having to attach and carry around a lee board and that sort of thing. So it's just something I wanted to experiment with while I was making this particular outrigger here for illustration purposes. This is not something that's in the plans, so don't worry too much about the fact that I've got that embedded in the outrigger. Here is the first layer on, and all I then need to do is butt up the second piece against that. Notice there's quite a bit of overhang here. That's because when I cut out the shape, there's about a 5mm allowance with the templates, and then I cut probably about another couple of mil outside of the lines, so that's fine. Once that's all glued on, you just basically sand that back with your hand planer. And there's our second panel on. I had a slight gap here just because of the way I'd cut those. That's okay because there's actually timber running across there either side, so it won't leak. And what I'll actually do is just fill that up with a bit of thickened epoxy, so there will be, you know, a bit of sanding and fairing of the outside. You want to see it sort of oozing down the outside as you're compressing that on, ideally, because that shows you've got enough glue. If not, you can sort of jam a bit sideways in there with a spatula or something, or a little piece of ply. But again, that can be done afterwards once we've planed off the overhanging edges, made it nice and smooth, and we can do a bit of fairing of the entire outrigger. Okay, so I will now leave that to dry. Okay, so here is the outrigger. As you can see, I've removed all of the blocks. I have planed down with my little hand planer the edges here, and then rounded it off with sandpaper. So you can see in most cases here I got the profile of the inwales, I think they're called, the bits of timber that ran along the inside there. In most cases it was nice and smoothed down, so we've got a nice tight join there. There are some spots like here where what I'll do is just put a bit of thickened epoxy in there at the same time as I fill up all of these holes here where the zip ties were and that sort of thing. I'll also give it a good sand overall, and then the next step will be to fiberglass and to epoxy it.